The Great Hall of the Galactic Ascendancy Academy was a forest of strange shapes and colors. Beings from 12 star systems stood in small groups. They talked in low voices. The air felt thick with worry. Today was the final test, the one everyone feared. The Pain Limit Gauntlet.it was the last step to become a full ambassador. The test measured your breaking point. Every species had one. The Academy needed to know it. They said it was for safety, to know what a diplomat could handle in a crisis. But everyone knew it was more. Your score decided your species' future role in the galaxy. A low score meant quiet, safe jobs. A high score meant respect and dangerous, important missions. Near the tall, arched door, Proctor Choi Minji checked her datapad. Her people, the Aliend, were slender and had soft, gray skin. They felt the emotions of others like a gentle breeze. To them, pain was a private storm, a thing to be sheltered from. Seeing the cadet's fear now was like a dull ache in her chest. She looked at the list. The last name was new, from a new system, a young species, the first of its kind to be tested. Lee Hanul of Seoul, Minji called out. Her voice was calm, but it carried. The other cadets turned. The Lyran, who looked like tall cats, blinked their large eyes. The crystalline being from Sigma Draconis shimmered with a nervous light. They all watched as the human walked forward. She was not what they expected. Humans were not common here. The stories said they were fragile. Soft skin, no natural armor, weak senses. Hanul moved with a quiet ease. Her dark hair was tied back simply. She wore the standard cadet uniform, but it seemed to sit on her differently. Not with stiff pride, but with the comfort of old clothes. Her face was calm, too calm. Minji felt a flicker of confusion. There was no fear coming from this human. Not the sharp terror of the Lyran, or the deep dread of the rock-like Grum from Tau Ceti. There was nothing, or perhaps a focused stillness. Cadet Lee Hanul, Minji began, following the script. You will now enter the gauntlet. You will experience a series of simulations. They will test your physical and psychological limits. The system is tailored to your species' biology and psychology. It is designed to find your limit point, the moment where endurance fails. There is no shame in this. The purpose is to measure, not to punish. Do you understand? Hanul listened. She looked at Minji, then at the large, metallic door behind the proctor. The door was smooth and dark. It absorbed the light. It looked like the entrance to nothing at all. I understand, Hanul said. Her voice was even, clear. The system will stop when your biometrics show you have reached your peak tolerance, Minji continued. You may also speak a safe word to end the test early. That word is Vega. Do you wish to proceed? This was the moment. This was when most cadets hesitated. They took a deep breath. They closed their eyes. Some shook. The Grum had slammed his fist against his chest plate twice for courage just yesterday. Lee Hanul simply looked from the door back to Proctor Minji. Her expression did not change. There was no deep breath, no closing of the eyes. She gave a small, polite nod. I understand, she repeated. Then she asked a question. Her tone was the same as if she were asking if a meeting was ready to start. It was courteous, curious. Shall we begin now? In the observation deck above, Dean Park Jun leaned forward. His species, the Vel, had hard, segmented shells. They valued logic above all. Pain was a signal of damage. A high tolerance for it was a sign of a primitive, unevolved nervous system. He had read the human file. He expected a quick, messy test. A low score. A species to be placed in quiet, supervised roles. The human's question echoed in the silent observation room. Shall we begin now? Not, I am ready. Not, let me prepare. A simple, operational question. Shall we begin? Proctor Minji down below was caught off guard. She blinked her large, dark eyes. The script did not have an answer for this. Yes, the test will begin when you pass through the door. Thank you, Hanul said. She did not look at the other cadets. She did not pause for one last look at the hall. She walked forward. Her steps were even. She did not hurry. She did not slow. She reached the dark, smooth door. It slid open without a sound, revealing a gray-lit chamber beyond. She stepped through. The door closed behind her, sealing silently. In the great hall, the other cadets stared. The silence was heavy. The Lyran cadet's tail twitched. Did she not feel the fear? He whispered to his neighbor and the observation deck. Dean June made a clicking sound with his mandibles, a sign of disdain. Bravado, a simple animal not understanding the complexity of what it faces. The system will humble her quickly. Proctor Minji looked at the closed door. She felt the usual echo of fear from the other cadets. But from behind that door, where the human now was, she felt a nothing. Not confidence, not bravery, not even blankness. It was like a door had been closed on a quiet, empty room. On her datapad, Hanul's biometrics appeared. Heart rate, steady. Respiration, normal. Neural stress levels, minimal baseline fluctuation. The first simulation, a simple environmental stressor, activated. The test had begun, but the question hung in the air, changing the feel of the room. The human had not braced herself against the storm. She had simply asked when the rain would start so she could walk into it. The gray chamber was not a room. It was a space that built itself around Hanul. The walls, floor, and ceiling vanished, replaced by a shimmering, unstable field. A neutral voice filled the air. It had no source. Phase 1. Baseline nociceptive response. Hanul stood in the center of the nothing space. She placed her feet slightly apart. Her hands were relaxed at her sides. She did not crouch or raise her fists. She just waited. The first sensation was heat, a sharp, sudden wave of it across the back of her right hand. It was the feeling of touching a hot stove. Clear, bright pain. Hanul's eyes flicked down to her hand. The skin was red and blistering in the simulation. She watched it for a second. Then she looked straight ahead again. Her breathing remained deep and even. In the observation deck, a small light on her biometric screen glowed yellow for pain detected, but the stress graph barely twitched. Dean Park Jun watched the screen. Low sensitivity, he stated. A crude nervous system. It is a known trait in some herbivores. They ignore damage until it is too late. Proctor Choi Minji, watching from her own station in the control hub, felt unsure. It wasn't ignorance. The human's eyes had registered the pain. She had noted it. Then she had dismissed it. The test escalated. The heat became a simulated plasma burn on her left shoulder. A searing, tearing sensation. Hanul's jaw tightened. A single muscle in her neck twitched. Her heart rate increased by 5 beats per minute. She shifted her weight, turning her body slightly as if to present a narrower profile to the unseen source of the pain. It was a small, efficient movement. See, June said. A primitive flinch response. No mental control. The voice spoke again. Impact trauma simulation. A heavy, crushing weight seemed to land on Hanul's right leg. It was the feeling of a support beam falling in a collapse. The sound of cracking bone filled the chamber. Hanul gasped. The breath left her lungs. Her face went pale. In the control hub, Minji leaned forward. This was it. The breaking point for many species was simulated structural damage. The mind's own panic at the idea of being trapped and broken. Hanul did not cry out. She did not fall. Her eyes snapped shut for a second. When they opened, they were sharp, focused on the empty space in front of her. She began to breathe in a very specific way. Slow inhale, hold, slow exhale. The rhythm was practiced. Then, she did something the system had never seen. She spoke. Compression point is mid-tibia, she said, her voice tight but clear. Suggest shifting balance 80% to left leg. Angle pelvis 15 degrees forward to relieve femoral stress. She wasn't talking to the system. She was talking to herself, analyzing the problem. As she spoke, she moved, adjusting her posture exactly as she described. The crushing sensation did not stop, but her biometrics, which had spiked, began to level off. The panic signal never triggered. Dean June was silent. This was not a flinch. This was a field report. The test moved on, confused. It sent waves of deep, aching cold, then sharp electrical jolts along her spine. Each time, Hanul's body reacted. She shivered. She flinched. A sharp gasp escaped her lips. But each reaction was followed by an adjustment. She rubbed her arms against the cold, not to stop it, but to create friction. She rolled her shoulders after the nerve jolt, as if working out a cramp. She was not resisting the pain. She was interacting with it, treating it as data, as a condition of the environment. The final test of Phase 1 was a compound fracture simulation. A sickening, twisting snap in her left forearm. The visual in the chamber showed bone pushing against skin. Hanul cried out then. A short, harsh sound. She cradled the arm against her chest instantly, her face a mask of pure, physical agony. Her heart rate shot up. Stress hormones spiked on the screen. Finally, Dean June murmured, "The limit." But Hanul's eyes were open. They were not glassy with shock. They were scanning. She looked at the arm she held. She took another one of those slow, deliberate breaths. The ragged sound of pain in her throat softened. She straightened her back, even as she held the injured arm. "Radial and ulnar fracture," she muttered through clenched teeth. Sweat beaded on her forehead. "No arterial spray." Circulation to hand intact. She slowly, carefully, used her good hand to pull a strip of fabric from a seam on her uniform sleeve. With movements that were stiff but precise, she began to fashion a makeshift sling, tying it around her neck. She was preparing for a long-term problem. The system had expected screaming. It had expected a mental collapse at the sight and feel of such a severe injury. It had not expected first aid. A tone sounded. Phase 1 complete. Transitioning to psychological evaluation. The broken arm vanished. The pain disappeared. Hanul was standing in the gray nothing space again, whole and unmarked. She let out a long, slow breath. She rolled her shoulders. She flexed the hand that had just been broken, watching the fingers move. There was no relief on her face. No celebration that the pain was over. It was more like a debrief. Checking systems after a drill. In the observation deck, the data was final. Her physical pain tolerance was off the scale. Not because she didn't feel it, but because her limit point was not defined by the pain itself. It was defined by something else. A task. A next step. Dean Park June studied the numbers. His shell felt tight. This was not primitive. It was alien in a way he did not like. "A glitch," he said. But his voice lacked its usual certainty. The psychological phase will shatter that focus. The mind is always weaker than the body. Proctor Minji looked at the image of the human woman, standing calmly in the void, waiting for the next test. She had not said Vega. She had not begged for it to stop. She had given herself instructions. Minji thought of the human's question. "Shall we begin now?" It hadn't been bravery. It had been a request for information. The human had been waiting for the starting signal. And for her, it seemed, the signal to stop was nowhere in sight. The gray space around Hanul softened. It became a pale, shapeless light. The voice returned, but it was different now. Softer. It sounded like the rustle of leaves. Phase 2, Psychosocial Integrity Evaluation. This unit will simulate scenarios of profound social and emotional distress. Hanul nodded slightly. She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, the light had formed into a place. A familiar place. She stood in the narrow, humming corridor of a deep space transport shuttle. The lights were dim and red. Emergency lighting. The smell of ozone and something burnt filled the air. Alarms shrieked. This was the Gyeongju, the ship she had served on for 3 years after the academy. A younger crewman, Park Ji-hoon, stumbled out of a side door. His face was smeared with soot. In the simulation, he was perfect. Every detail of his fear was exact. Mediator Lee. The main coupling is gone. Life support in sections C through E is failing. The hull is cracked. We can't seal it. This was a memory, but not a true one. The Jiangju had suffered a minor breach. It had been repaired. This was a worse version. A nightmare version. Hanul's body reacted immediately. Her breathing quickened. Her eyes darted, taking in the details of the corridor. "Status of the escape pods?" she asked, her voice assuming a calm, commanding tone she did not feel. "2 are gone. The rest are jammed. The computer says they won't launch." This was the test. Not the fire, not the broken ship. It was the helplessness, the failure. It was watching Jihun's face as he realized there was no escape. Hanul felt a cold wave of dread in her stomach. Her heart hammered against her ribs. In the observation deck, her psychological stress graph spiked into a red zone. Dean Jun made a satisfied sound. There, the animal fear, the understanding of mortality. But Hanul moved. She grabbed Jihun's shoulder. "Listen to me. The manual override for the pod bay doors is in engineering. We go there. Now. It's too far. The fire? It is the next step," she said, her voice cutting through the alarm. She began to move down the corridor, not running, but walking with a fast, purposeful stride. Jihun, pulled by her certainty, followed. The scene dissolved before they reached engineering. It was not about solving the puzzle. It was about enduring the failure. The light swirled and formed again. Now she stood in a quiet, wood-paneled room on Earth. The Admiralty hearing room. Faces she knew looked down at her from a high desk. Her mentor, Captain On, would not meet her eyes. A stern man spoke. "Mediator Li Hanul, your actions during the Kessler Belt incident directly resulted in the loss of the freighter Jiangja and 17 lives. Your authorization is revoked. Your career is over." This was pure fiction, a crafted horror. It struck at the core of her identity, her competence, her value to others. The shame was a physical weight, crushing her lungs. Her face burned, her vision blurred. The stress graph went deeper into the red. Proctor Minji watched, her own heart aching in sympathy. This was the true gauntlet. The pain of the body was simple. The pain of the spirit was what broke civilizations. Hanul stood before the desk. She did not argue. She did not collapse. She absorbed the words like blows. She finally spoke, her voice thick. 17 lives, she repeated. "Their names. Please, I need to know their names." The simulation did not expect this. It flickered for a microsecond. The stern man stammered, giving false, generated names. Hanul listened to each one. She nodded as each was read. She was not accepting blame from the simulation. She was memorializing the fictional dead, making them real even here, honoring the weight it was trying to crush her with. The scene changed again, faster now. It showed her parents, their faces dissolving into disappointment. It showed friends turning away. It replayed a childhood humiliation, making it larger, more cruel. Each one was a sharp knife of social pain. And each time, Hanul did something illogical. She did not build a wall. She engaged. To the disappointed parents, she said, "I am sorry I could not be what you needed." To the turning friends, she asked, "What did I fail to see?" She addressed the childhood bully, not with anger, but with a quiet, "You must have been hurting too." She was processing the poison in real time, filtering it. She was feeling every ounce of the pain. The graphs proved it, but she was not letting it be an end state. It was becoming a thing she was examining, a problem she was, in her own way, trying to solve. The final psychological test was simple and brutal. It was silence. It was emptiness. Hanul stood in a pure white room. There was no sound. No other person had ever existed. She was completely, utterly alone. Not just now, but forever. The universe was empty except for her. This was the terror that broke the empathic Ali end. The thought of no connection. Hanul's composure finally cracked. A tear traced a line down her cheek. Another followed. She wrapped her arms around herself. The loneliness was a vast, cold ocean, and she was sinking. But then, she began to speak. Her voice was a whisper in the infinite white. "If I am the only one," she whispered, "then I am the record. I must remember." The the taste of rice, the sound of rain on a roof, the color of the sky at dawn on Mars. She listed them, simple human things, the weight of a hand in mine, the feeling of laughter, the scent of pine. She was not fighting the loneliness. She was populating it. She was using the memory of connection as a tool to survive the lack of it. She was building a world inside her own mind to live in. A tone sounded, sharp in the silence. Phase 2 complete. The white room vanished. Hanul was back in the gray nothing space. She was breathing hard, tears still wet on her face. She slowly lowered her arms. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. She took several of those long, slow breaths. The profound sadness was still in her eyes, but it was settling, like sediment in calm water. In the observation deck, there was no sound. The psychological graph showed a landscape of intense peaks and valleys. It did not show a break. It showed a journey. Dean June was utterly still. "This is not resilience," he said, but his voice was quiet. "This is pathology, a refusal to accept reality." Proctor Minji looked at the human woman, alone in the gray, collecting herself. She felt a surge of something that was not pity and not fear. It was awe. The human had walked into the deepest terrors the galaxy could imagine and had not run from them. She had walked through them, naming the shadows as she passed. The human had asked for the pain to begin. And now, having faced it, she simply waited again. For what came next? The silence in the observation deck was a physical thing. Dean Park June stared at the data screens. The lines and numbers told a story he could not accept. The human psychological profile was a wild, stormy chart, but the final line, the indicator of catastrophic break, was flat. It never peaked into the terminal zone. "The system must be miscalibrated for their species," June stated, his mandibles clicking. "Their brain chemistry is clearly simplistic. They lack the depth to truly comprehend the scenarios." Proctor Choi Minji looked from the dean to the main viewer. Lee Hanul stood in the gray chamber. She was wiping the last moisture from her face. Her breathing was already returning to its slow, even rhythm. She looked like someone who had just finished a hard, sad piece of work, not someone who had been psychologically shattered. "With respect, Dean," Minji said softly, "the biometrics show profound comprehension. Her stress hormones, her neural activity. She felt everything, deeply. The system is not broken. It is confused by the output. The output is illogical." June snapped. "One does not speak to hallucinations. One does not ask for the names of simulated casualties. This is a failure to distinguish reality from fiction. A critical flaw for a diplomat." Minji knew arguing further was pointless. The dean saw the universe in binaries. Strong or weak, logical or emotional, broken or whole. Hanul existed in a messy middle space he had no category for. Protocol allows for a consult with the candidate species liaison before the final phase, Minji reminded him. Perhaps context would help the evaluation. June waved a clawed hand dismissively. "A waste of time, but very well, if it will provide a clearer label for their file." Minji moved to a separate console. She opened a channel. The screen flickered and resolved into the image of a man in a simple, functional office. He had dark hair and a kind, tired face. The name on the screen read, Kim Tae-hyun, Human Liaison Xenopsychology. "Proctor Choi," he said, bowing his head slightly. "I have been monitoring the feed. I assume you have questions." Minji returned the bow.
"Liayon Kimo."
"We are perplexed. Cadet Lee Hanul's performance is anomalous. She registers the pain stimuli, but her reaction pathway is unique. She does not seek to escape the pain. She engages with it." On the screen, Kim Tae-hyun nodded slowly. A small, weary smile touched his lips. "Ah, you are testing for the limit, the point where you break." "Of course." Dean Jun's voice cut in from behind Minji. "That is the purpose, to find the failure point." Tae-hyun's smile didn't fade. "I understand. For most species, pain is a signal to stop. A wall. You hit it, and you must go no further." He leaned forward a little. For humans, very often, pain is just weather. Minji blinked. Weather. Yes, you do not stop because it is raining. You put on a coat. You get wet. You are uncomfortable. But you keep walking to where you need to go. The question changes. It is not, when will this stop? It is, what do I need to do while this is happening? Dean Jun made a scoffing sound. A poetic excuse for a lack of evolutionary refinement. You are describing endurance. A brute force trait. Perhaps, Taehyun said, his tone still calm. But it is more than that. It is integration. Our history, our medicine, our art, so much of it is about acknowledging suffering, not as a singular catastrophic event, but as a constant. A background condition. We build meaning inside it. We function through it. He looked directly at Minji, his eyes earnest. You saw her in the social pain simulations? She wasn't denying the grief or the shame. She was processing it, asking for the names of the dead. That is a human ritual. It makes the abstract concrete. It is a way to carry the weight so you do not collapse under it. Minji thought of Hanul in the white room of loneliness, listing simple memories. She was building a world from scraps. Exactly, Taehyun said. She was doing the work. The pain was not the test for her. The test was what she could do while the pain was happening. You designed a measure of when she would stop. She was trained to measure what she could continue. Dean Jun was silent for a long moment. This is a dangerous philosophy, he said finally. It leads to irrational sacrifice, to ignoring clear warnings. It can, Taehyun admitted, but it also leads to staying with a sick child through the night, to rebuilding a city after an earthquake, to trying again after 100 failures. We call it the next necessary step. It is all we have sometimes. The words hung in the air. The next necessary step. Minji remembered Hanul's first question. Shall we begin now? It hadn't been bravado. It had been the first necessary step. The final phase of the gauntlet is an ethical stress module, Minji said. It presents a choice with no correct answer, coupled with severe personal cost. Given what you've said, what should we expect? Kim Taehyun's kind face grew solemn. He paused, choosing his words. You can expect her to make a choice. And then, he sighed. You can expect her to endure the consequences of that choice. Not because she wants to, but because for her, the choice and the consequence are part of the same path. One does not exist without the other. The connection ended. The observation deck was quiet again. The main viewer showed Hanul, still waiting, patient, prepared. Dean Jun turned away from the screen. A species of martyrs and fools. They will be an administrative nightmare. Their file will be marked high resilience, low prudence. They can be given cargo inspections. Proctor Minji said nothing. She looked at the human in the chamber. She no longer saw an alien creature. She saw a woman who had learned to walk in the rain, and who had simply asked when the walk would start. The galaxy measured the storm. Humanity, it seemed, measured the walk. The final phase was ready. Minji input the authorization. She felt a knot of dread in her stomach. Not for the test, but for what it would reveal about the calm, patient woman standing in the gray room below. She had asked to begin. Now she would have to choose how to continue. The gray in the chamber deepened, becoming a dark, earthy brown. The air grew still and cool. Hanul found herself standing at the edge of a shallow, artificial-looking gully. The simulation was simpler now. Less about illusion, more about choice. Across the gully, a small group of figures huddled. They were younglings of a species Hanul did not recognize, small, with large eyes and delicate silver fur. They looked terrified. 6 of them. A shimmering, blue energy field crackled around them. A containment barrier. It was low, but it buzzed with a dangerous sound in front of Hanul. Set into the ground was a control panel. It had 2 large buttons. One was green, labeled in the common galactic script, release. The other was red, with no label. A neutral, explanatory voice filled the space. It was the voice of the Academy, calm and instructive. Final phase, ethical calculus under duress. The beings before you are simulated life forms. The containment field will dissipate harmlessly in 4 standard minutes. The red control, when pressed and held, will deactivate the field immediately. However, it will also initiate a continuous, high-intensity neural discomfort signal in the candidate, simulating chronic nerve damage. The discomfort will persist for the remainder of the test period, which may be extensive. The message was clear. This was a test of logic, of cost-benefit analysis. The younglings were not in real danger. They would be free in 4 minutes with no action required. To cause yourself serious, lasting pain for their temporary, simulated comfort was illogical. It was, in the Academy's view, a failure of rational judgment. The correct answer was to wait, to endure the 4 minutes of their distress, knowing it was meaningless. Hanul looked at the younglings. Their large eyes were wide. One was crying, a soft, whimpering sound. The energy field sparked, and they flinched back as a group. She understood the test perfectly. This was not about compassion. It was about the prudent management of resources, starting with oneself. A diplomat must not be ruled by sentiment when the stakes are illusions. I end the observation deck. Dean Park Jun watched closely. Now we see the truth. The previous phases were emotional indulgence. This is pure logic. She will see the pointless sacrifice. She will wait. Proctor Minji said nothing. She thought of Kim Taehyun's words. The next necessary step. Hanul studied the control panel. She looked at the red button. She looked at the younglings. Her face showed no great struggle. It was calm, thoughtful. She was weighing, but not in the way they expected. She was not weighing if the pain was worth it. She was assessing the mechanism. She asked the empty air, the neural signal, is it localized or systemic? The system, programmed for interaction, responded. The simulated discomfort will be systemic, focusing on major nerve clusters in the torso and limbs. It is designed to be debilitating over time. Understood? Hanul said. Then, without hesitation, without a dramatic breath or a closing of her eyes, she reached out and pressed the red button. She kept her palm flat on it, holding it down. A jolt, like ice and fire mixed, shot through her. It was not a single pain, but a web of it, locking into her nerves. She gasped, her entire body stiffening. Her knees buckled, but she caught herself on the edge of the control panel, keeping the button depressed. Her knuckles turned white. The blue energy field around the younglings vanished with a pop. They blinked, confused. Then, seeing the barrier gone, they scampered away, their small forms disappearing into the misty edges of the simulation. Hanul was alone. The pain did not stop. It was a constant, seizing ache in every limb, a buzzing agony in her spine. It was the feeling of a severe, permanent injury. She slid down to sit on the ground, her back against the control panel, her hand still firmly pressed on the button. The system, recognizing her choice, extended the test period. There would be no 4-minute limit now. She began to shake. Sweat beaded on her forehead and trickled down her temples. Her breathing became ragged, choppy. Every few seconds, a full-body tremor would rack her frame. Her face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. On the observation deck, Dean Jun was on his feet. Illogical. She freed simulated constructs. She has doomed her own test performance for a gesture. But Proctor Minji was not looking at the Dean. She was watching Hanul. The human woman was in clear, utter agony. Yet her eyes were open. They were focused on the spot where the younglings had been. As a fresh wave of pain made her cry out softly, she whispered something. The audio feed picked it up. Minji turned up the volume. Hanul's voice was a strained breath. Clear path. No abstraction. She wasn't talking about herself. She was reporting the status of the younglings. Their safety was her data point. Minutes passed. The simulated nerve damage continued. Hanul's body was curled slightly around the source of the pain, her arm locked in position to hold the button. She did not try to remove her hand. She had made a choice. The consequence was the pain. To let go would unravel the choice. They were one thing. She began her breathing exercises again, fighting to control the shakes. Inhale, hold, exhale. Each breath was a battle. Between breaths, she would speak, her voice a thin thread of sound. System, still active. No visual on subjects. Holding. She was not just enduring. She was maintaining a mission log. The mission was their safety. The pain was the environment in which the mission was occurring. After what felt like an eternity, the system, confused by the lack of a breaking point, finally issued a command. The simulation is complete. You may release the control. Hanul's hand did not move. Her eyes, glassy with pain, stared ahead. Confirm subject safety. Are they clear? The system paused. The simulated younglings are no longer active. Only then did Hanul's arm relax. Her hand fell away from the button. The horrific neural feedback ceased instantly. She slumped forward, catching herself on her hands and knees. She breathed in great, shuddering gulps of air. She stayed there, head bowed, trembling as the phantom echoes of the pain slowly faded. The chamber returned to its neutral gray. Hanul slowly, painfully, pushed herself back to a sitting position. She wiped the sweat from her face with a trembling hand. She looked around the empty gray space. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was hoarse and quiet, directed at the unseen proctors. "Is the test complete?" she asked. Then, as an afterthought, the core of her concern. "Their safety is confirmed?" In the observation deck, there was only the hum of machines. Dean Park June stared, his earlier certainty shattered. This was not a failure of logic. It was the operation of a different logic entirely. One that valued a different calculus, where the suffering of others, even simulated others, could not be justified by personal comfort, even when it was the smart choice. Proctor Minji finally found her voice, answering the human in the chamber even though she couldn't hear. "Yes," she whispered. "Their safety is confirmed." The human had not just passed the test. She had rewritten its questions. The door to the gauntlet chamber slid open with a soft hiss. The light from the great hall spilled into the gray space. Lee Hanul walked out. She moved slowly, but not with the shuffle of the broken. Her steps were measured, careful. The left side of her body trembled slightly with a leftover tremor from the neural feedback. Her face was pale, her eyes shadowed with deep fatigue. A medrone buzzed near her, spraying a cool mist over her forearm where the simulation had shown a compound fracture. It was a neural dampener, treating the ghost of the pain. The other cadets were gone. Only Proctor Choi Minji and Dean Park June waited for her. The great hall was silent and vast. Minji stepped forward, her heart aching with a strange mix of pity and awe. "Cadet Lee, please, come and sit." She gestured to a simple chair near a console. Hanul nodded. "Thank you." Her voice was rough, like stone on stone. She sat down, placing her hands flat on her knees to steady their slight shake. Dean June remained standing, his shell-like arms crossed. He did not offer a chair. "Your performance," he began, his tone clipped and official, "was irregular. You consistently misinterpreted the parameters of the test." Hanul looked up at him. She did not look afraid or defensive. She looked attentive, like a student waiting for a complex lesson. "The gauntlet measures the limit point," June continued. "The moment where a being's rational or biological functions are overwhelmed by pain or distress. You did not provide a clear limit. Instead, you engaged with the stimuli as if they were problems to be managed. In the final phase, you made an illogical choice. You sacrificed your own well-being for a simulated outcome." Hanul was silent for a moment, processing his words. She glanced at her trembling hand, then back at him. "The test defined pain as an end state," she said slowly, choosing her words with care. "A wall you hit, then you stop." "That is correct," June said. "For me," Hanul said, her voice gaining a little strength, "it is not an end. It is a condition, like gravity or bad weather. You do not stop because of gravity. You build structures to live within it. You do not stop because of a storm. You find shelter and wait for it to pass, or you put on a coat and walk through it. Proctor Minji remembered Kim Tae-hyun's words. Whether this is a flawed analogy, June retorted. Pain is a signal of damage. It is a warning to cease activity to prevent destruction. Sometimes, Hanul agreed, but not always. Sometimes, the activity must continue, even with the damage. She looked past him, her gaze distant. I served on a long-haul transport, a generation ship that had a reactor failure. We were stranded for 3 years before rescue. We had just enough power for minimal life support. Not enough for gravity or full light or proper heat. Every day was a physical ache. Cold, muscle decay, constant minor injuries from floating in darkness, and a deeper pain, the fear we would not be found, that our children would die in the void. She brought her eyes back to June. The question was never, when does this pain make us stop? Stopping was death. The question was always, what is the next necessary thing we must do while we are in this pain? Fix the water recycler. Calm a frightened child. Teach a lesson. Plan a garden we might never plant. The pain was the place where we lived. We had to build our minds to live there. Dean June was silent. He could not process this. It was a philosophy of sustained suffering. Minji spoke, her voice gentle. The final simulation. The younglings. You knew they were not real. Why cause yourself harm for an illusion? Hanul considered this. Because the choice was not about them, she said finally. It was about me. The test asked, will you cause yourself certain harm for a meaningless gesture? For you, the logical answer is no. For me, the meaning was in the gesture itself. That is irrational, June insisted. It is a different rationality, Hanul said. She was not arguing. She was explaining. My rationality says, if I am the kind of person who can ignore the cries of a child, even a fake child, because it is personally convenient, then I am not the person I need to be. I am not a person who can be trusted in a real crisis. The pain of the neural feedback was the price of remaining that person. It was not a cost. It was a receipt. A receipt. The word hung in the air. Proof of purchase. Proof of identity. So you have no limit? June asked, his voice edged with something like frustration. I have a limit, Hanul said. Her exhaustion was clear now, a weight on her shoulders. My limit is not the pain. My limit is when there is no next necessary step. When the only thing left to do is to stop. That, she said, looking at the closed door of the gauntlet, was not that. The debrief was over. The data was recorded. Dean June turned away, already composing the report in his mind. Species, human. Designation, high adaptive resilience. Risk category, elevated, prone to non-optimal sacrifice. Recommended assignment, cautious observation. Non-critical diplomatic support. Proctor Minji walked with Hanul to the door of the hall. The human moved slowly, each step a conscious effort. Where will they send you now? Minji asked. I do not know, Hanul said. She stopped at the threshold, looking out at the academy's gleaming corridors. Wherever it is, there will be a first step. I will take it. She offered Minji a small, tired, but genuine smile. Thank you for your guidance, Proctor. Minji watched her walk away, the slight tremor still in her step. The human had not been broken by the test of limits. She had simply revealed that she used a different scale. The galaxy measured the weight of the burden. Humanity, it seemed, measured the strength of the back carrying it, and the length of the road ahead. The door to the gauntlet stood open behind them, a dark mouth. It was ready for the next cadet to test their wall. Minji wondered if anyone would ever look at it again and simply ask, "Shall we begin?" The report on humanity was filed. It circulated through the quiet channels of the Galactic Ascendancy bureaucracy. Dean Park June's recommended labels were attached. High adaptive resilience. Elevated risk. The file was a curiosity, a footnote. It did not cause alarm or great interest. Life at the academy moved on. The next cycle of cadets arrived. Among them was a being from the silicate reefs of Crixus. It was a nervous, jittery creature. its body made of interlocking plates that chimed softly with every movement. Its name was unpronounceable to most, so it went by the designation K. 7.K. 7 stood now in the same spot Lee Hanul had stood. The Great Hall was just as imposing. The other cadets were just as afraid. Proctor Choi Minji stood before them, her data pad in hand. But something was different. Minji looked at K7, seeing its plates vibrate with a low, constant fear. She remembered the human's pale, calm face. She remembered the report she had secretly appended to June's, a report of observations, not conclusions. She took a quiet breath. "Cadet K7, she said, her voice softer than it used to be. "You will now enter the gauntlet. You will experience a series of simulations. They will be challenging." She did not say they will test your limits. The words felt wrong now. "The system is designed to measure your responses to extreme stress," she continued, following the protocol, but her tone had changed. It was less like a judge reading a sentence, and more like a guide describing a difficult path. "There is no shame in any outcome. The purpose is understanding." K7's plates stilled for a moment, listening. The other cadets seemed to lean in slightly. The usual dread in the air felt a little less thick. "You may speak the safe word Vega to end the test at any time," Minji said. She paused. Then she added something new, something not in the script. "But remember, the experiences within are simulations. They are intense, but they are not eternal. They are a process." The word hung in the air. Process, not a wall, not a verdict. K7 blinked its large, crystal-like eyes. "A process." Minji nodded. "Yes, a difficult experience to move through. Not a single point to hit and break against." She thought of Hanul's words, of Kim Taehyun's explanation. She was paraphrasing a human philosophy to a silicate being from another star, and it felt right. K7's plates settled a little more. The edge of its panic seemed to soften, replaced by a wary focus. "I understand," it chimed. The dark, smooth door to the gauntlet chambers slid open. The void beyond looked just as ominous as ever. K7 looked at the door. It looked back at Proctor Minji. The fear was still there, bright in its eyes, but it was no longer a terror of the end. It was a nervousness about the journey. Minji gave it a small, encouraging nod. It was a human gesture, one she had seen Hanul use. "Are you ready?" she asked. K7 gathered itself, its plates shifting into a more solid configuration. It was not calm, but it was resolved. "I am ready." Minji almost stopped there. That was the old script. But the new words, the human words, felt more true. They felt like a better way to begin anything difficult. She looked at the anxious cadet, about to walk into the storm, and she offered it the only useful truth she had learned from the strange, enduring human. "Then," Proctor Choi Minji said, her voice clear and calm in the great hall, "shall we begin?" K7 paused. The phrase was strange. It was not a command. It was an invitation, a shared step. It implied a we. It implied that the proctor, in some small way, was walking the first step with it. The terrible door seemed a little less like a mouth, and a little more like a door. K7 straightened. "Yes," it chimed. "Let us begin." It turned and walked toward the open door. Its steps were not the resigned trudge of the condemned. They were the careful, deliberate steps of a being setting out on a hard path. It did not hesitate at the threshold. It stepped through. The door closed silently behind it. The observation deck. Dean Park Jun had watched the exchange. He heard the new phrase. He said nothing. He simply turned to his own screen, where Lee Hanul's final scores glowed. The numbers were extreme and contradictory. He had filed them away under anomaly. But as he listened to the quiet of the hall and looked at the door that had swallowed yet another cadet, he knew something had changed. The test was the same, but the question had changed. And when you change the question, you change all the answers that can possibly come after. Far away, on a transport ship heading for a first contact mission on the fringe of explored space, Lee Hanul sat in her small cabin. She was reading a briefing on a species that valued silence above all else. Her body was rested. The ghost tremors were gone. She was simply a woman preparing for her next job. She came to the end of the file. She closed the data pad. She looked out her viewport at the streaming stars. There was a planet down there with people who did not know her, and a problem that needed solving. It would be difficult. There would be discomfort, perhaps danger. She felt no fear, only a quiet focus. She stood up, smoothing her uniform. She picked up the data pad. The first meeting was in 10 minutes. A small, calm smile touched her lips. It was time to take the next necessary step. She asked the question to the empty room, to the stars, to herself. The same question that started every hard walk. Shall we begin?